The new Helldivers 2 Warbond Truth Enforcers has just released. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 3 new weapons, the new armor, and new perk that arrive with it. If you enjoyed today's content, make sure to like and subscribe for future Helldivers 2 content. To start things off, let's talk about the SMG-32, the Reprimand. It is a high-caliber machine gun sporting armor penetration 3, or medium armor penetration. It does 125 damage per shot. It has a ammo capacity of 25 rounds per magazine in a total of 9 magazines. And it has about 500 fire rate, putting it on a similar caliber to things such as the Pummeler. Let's jump into a quick game to see how it sounds, looks, and also performs against a handful of enemies.
Found something! Found something!
Having played with the Reprimand in a couple difficulty 10 matches against both the automatons and terminins, I gotta say, it feels like a fairly chunky weapon. It's definitely not very close to the other SMGs in how you play it, and feels a lot closer to things like the Adjudicator instead. Of course, this doesn't really have the accuracy for that, so it's a very close-range weapon, but the ability to one-shot things like Devastator heads with it on top of just the medium armor penetration means that most enemies die in 1 or 2 shots, and with good trigger discipline, it proved to be very reliable. I overall like how the gun feels, it's very punchy, and I think it's a very legitimate option for difficulty 10 playthroughs. Next, let's talk about the secondary, the Plas 15 Loyalist, a plasma pistol that can essentially be boiled down to a secondary version of the Purifier, able to charge up and release explosive plasma shots that can be quite devastating. It has 7 shots per magazine, with a total of 4 magazines in total. Each shot takes about a second to charge up, same as the Purifier, although you can also rapid fire uncharged shots if needed. The base damage is 125, but charging it up adds an explosion on top of that that allows it to one-shot quite a fair number of enemies that have more than 125 health. It also contains medium armor penetration, and like all secondaries, is a one-handed weapon. Let's go into a game and see how it does. Overall, I believe the Loyalist is probably going to be a fairly popular and potent secondary weapon. The simple fact that it is another medium armor penetration secondary on top of also containing that explosiveness similar to the Purifier gives it a lot of utility. And even though it's limited on ammunition, just having sort of a baby version of the Purifier is still really good, because the Purifier, after it's gotten buffed, is probably one of the best primaries in the game, and the Loyalist definitely feels like it has a lot of things going for it in the same vein. I would even say it might challenge things like the Senator as one of the go-to secondaries, which is a testament, because the Senator, after it got heavy armor penetration, has been just incredibly powerful. Moving on to our third and final weapon, the SG-20 Halt is a very interesting dual-capacity shotgun, shooting both armor-piercing flechette rounds for damage and lethality, or being able to shoot low-damage stun rounds able to stagger and bring enemies to a halt. The shotgun is quite unique in that it actually has 2 ammo containers for the different rounds, meaning that it actually contains 8 rounds for the flechette and 8 rounds for the stun shots. Loading a shell into whatever ammo type you have currently selected will reload that magazine, and by swapping to the other one, you can load that up. It contains a total of 60 rounds in reserve and is rounds reloading, meaning that it can also load rounds directly into its magazines without losing ammo. Damage-wise, it has 385 damage per shot and an 80 rounds per minute, putting it very similar to that of the other pump-action shotguns. Notably, the base Punisher is very similar in damage, but lacks the medium armor penetration, although it does contain a larger overall magazine. The stun rounds overall seem to do far less damage and only retain light armor penetration. They definitely are not meant for killing enemies, but as we'll see in a second, their ability to stun and stagger enemies is almost unparalleled in terms of weapons that do similar effects. Now let's head over into a game to see how it looks and feels. Overall, I find the Halt to be an extremely flexible and capable shotgun, and maybe one of the best pump-action shotguns in the game. Being able to tackle medium-sized enemies with good damage and overall reliable armor penetration is very useful, and when you need to, stun rounds are able to keep crowds in control while you either use stratagems, grenades, or have a buddy help finish them off. On top of that, it even has the utility of doing things like chargers by essentially stopping them dead in their tracks, which seems very powerful. I would tentatively say that the Halt is maybe the best of the 3 guns in the Warbond at the moment, although I think all 3 of them are definitely very solid at least. Moving over to the new booster, Dead Sprint is a very interesting perk, as Helldivers, when they are out of stamina, can essentially turn their health into stamina, allowing them to continue to run. Let's see a quick demonstration in-game of what this kind of allows you to do before we talk about it a bit more.
Sub-objective in your vicinity.
My life for Super Earth!
Overall, I find that as a booster, Dead Sprint makes a decent case for its use. It's not always going to be the most relevant thing, but it has been nice in certain situations where you're being overwhelmed to be able to make it out of there even if your stamina runs out. I've definitely had a couple instances where I've essentially sprinted out of danger by trading some of my health, and especially combined with a booster, you're able to cover large amounts of distances in very quick manners. I don't think it's an auto take like something such as the experimental infusion is, but I do think that it's overall a solid enough option that isn't a detriment to your team and has its uses. The final new thing that impacts gameplay is the 2 new armor sets with a new armor passive available to them. The UF50 Bloodhound, a medium armor with the Unflinching trait, and the UF16 Inspector, which is a light armor with the new passive. Unflinching is a armor passive that says helps prevent Helldivers from flinching when hit. I have been playing with the Bloodhound armor set for several games, and I have to say that either the Unflinching perk is currently bugged and not working, or what the game considers as flinching is very small and it feels largely unnoticeable. At the moment, I'm not a big fan of this because the one thing that I thought this would be fixing would be the stim interrupts that happens when you try to stim and get hit by something, as I figured that would be a flinch, but seemingly that is not the case, which, if that's not the case, then the other flinches seem a lot less impactful, and overall it just seems like these armor sets, although very cool visually, their perks are pretty bad at the moment, and again possibly bugged. The rest of the Warbond is cosmetic, with skins for things like mechs and hell pods, on top of things like new capes and banners and all those things. In the background, you'll be able to see me scroll through these and show them off while we close out this video by giving my final thoughts. I think overall, Truth Enforcers is a fairly solid Warbond. Unlike a lot of the other Warbonds that have come out recently, like Viper Commando, or Freedom's Flame, or the Chemical Agents, I think Truth Enforcers is coming out in a fairly balanced state. The weapons feel pretty strong, the perk is quite useful, I do think the armor passive is a bit underwhelming, but I think that in terms of what you get, this is a fairly solid middle-of-the-pack Warbond. It's not nearly as good as things like Democratic Demolition, but it's also not as bad as some of the other Warbonds like Polar Patriots were when they needed pretty big buffs in order to be good. It's, I think, a good power level for Warbonds to come out from, and I personally really like the art style in these cosmetics, but that's a bit subjective. If you don't like it, then maybe pass on this. I think there's better Warbonds to get if it's your first one, but if you're looking for a pretty fun shotgun, a bulky SMG on top of the various paint schemes and all that, I think this is a fairly solid recommended. And with that all said, we are at the end of this little video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this Warbond. Also, make sure to like and subscribe for future Helldiver 2 related content. If you have watched all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good day.